My name's Ian, and I'll be your host. Only the speaker and I will have access to voice. All of you will be muted, but we encourage you to please ask questions throughout the webinar using the questions pane on your GoToWebinar interface. Follow us on Twitter at The One Thing Book and at jpapasan, and share your webinar tweets during and after the webinar to keep the conversation going with the hashtag #TheOneThing. Also, visit our website to learn more about The One Thing at www.theonething.com. This webinar is being recorded and you will get it via email within 24 hours. Let's go now on to our today's speaker. We're excited to have Jay Papasan with us today. Jay is a former editor at HarperCollins Publisher. He's co-author of the Wall Street Journal bestseller The One Thing and multiple other books. He's vice president of publishing at Keller Williams Realty, and he's also a frequent event speaker and corporate trainer. Thanks for being with us today, Jay.
Hey, I'm really happy to talk about The One Thing for Business, Ian. Thanks a lot for setting this all up for everyone.
Great. So before we begin, just want to do a reminder again to please ask questions throughout the webinar. We will be answering questions live after the presentation. And with that, let's begin. Back to you, Jay.
All right, thanks a lot, Ian. All right, so today's The One Thing for your business. If you remember from the book, and I'm going to go under the assumption that most people who are on this call are at least passingly familiar with the book. I will recap some of the big points, but I'm going to talk to you today as if you're at least somewhat familiar, you're reading the book, or have already read the book. And for the rest of you, I'm going to give you some contextual stuff and encourage you to go back and experience the book and then ask this question in context of having read that. But in the book on page 114, we talk about the different areas of your life that we feel are important enough to ask the focusing question. Your spiritual life, your physical life, your personal life, your key relationships, your job, your business, and your finances. And for a lot of people, they ask me, what's the difference between my job and my business? And if you're not in an entrepreneurial endeavor, I know we work with a lot of real estate agents who are self-employed or who run their own businesses. It's a question that you might want to ask in context of your employer, right? What is the one thing for the business I'm a part of? Most businesses have a one thing, and they have a one thing that drives them. Today, I'm just going to give you the quick recap. The essence of this book is really summed up in Pareto's principle. Hopefully, you're familiar with the 80-20 principle, and basically, it's something that Vilfredo Pareto, Italian economist back in the 1800s, he looked up and was studying wealth in Italy and discovered that 80% of the wealth was held by 20% of the people. Well, it turns out that ratio showed up again and again and again. And later, in the 1900s, a guy named Joseph Duran, a quality control guru, kind of popularized it, and it became known as Pareto's Law. And basically it says, and this is where the numbers we throw out the window and take, what's the big thing we need to learn from this? The majority of your results will come from the minority of your efforts. The majority of your results come from the minority of your efforts. Of all the things that you do, there are a handful that really move the needle. And the people who are most successful in business and life are people who really pay attention to the results they get from their activities. It's funny, I was reading, I've always, got some effort, to be reading some business book somewhere. And I picked up one by Peter Drucker called Managing Oneself. And one of the things he said that was essential to having a successful career in business was to write down your expectations before you go into any endeavor, and then check back 6 to 18 months later. You come back and say, well, this is what I expected to happen. What did happen? And he said in the short course of maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 years, you get a very, very good idea of what you're, one, very good at, what you're not good at, and what works for you. And what he's essentially advocating, without calling it, is acknowledgement of Pareto's Law and taking a look in your world for the things that really move the needle. What are the things that you do in your job, in your business, that really give you disproportionate results? Gary looks at this and he calls it a law of success. And he says it's as real as the laws that govern our universe, like gravity. Nobody here is going to step off of a building and tempt gravity. We believe in it, even if scientists sometimes struggle to explain it. I can drop a pencil, boom, there's gravity. You can see it, you can see the effects. Business people understand this law, and they treat it just as real. It's absolutely a certainty. So when people tap into this, we're just asking you to keep asking, what's the 20% of the 20% till you get to one thing? And what the promise of that endeavor, of focusing your efforts on the activity, not activities that matter the most, is what we call a domino run. And it's a big theme in the book, The One Thing, is when you line things up properly, doing one thing can make many things happen, right? It's like lining up dominoes and letting them all fall down when you knock over one. So we often exhort people, line up your dominoes. Look for the action that has the most leverage in your life. This is going to be, one of those fun factoids, but it's also tangential to something I'm going to mention later in this presentation. There was a guy named Lorne Whitehead, and in 86, he wrote an essay in the Journal of Physics, the American Journal of Physics. And what he discovered is that one domino can actually knock over a domino that's 50% bigger. So a 2-inch domino can knock over a 3-inch domino, and a 3-inch domino can knock over a 4.5-inch domino. And he wrote about this, and he actually built wooden dominoes. And by the 8th or 9th one, it was as big as like a doorway, right? And he said, what began with a gentle tick ended with a loud slam. And his whole thing was, wow, you can go from a domino run to what they call a geometric progression. It can actually progressively knock over larger and larger things. It's what a lot of people refer to as just momentum. So if you pick the right one thing, the thing that's truly leveraged, and you do it over time, bigger and bigger results can start to show up. You actually can augment kind of your initial response to something and your initial results by doing it over time, developing momentum. You get more expertise and more mastery, and the longer you do something, the more effective it becomes for you. And so that idea of a domino run can actually become a geometric progression. It can actually yield massive, massive results in your life. So here's the focusing question I alluded to earlier. It's kind of the heart of the book. It's the key to kind of unlocking your one thing. Basically, the question reads, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? What we're asking you to today is, like we showed you in the 7 circles, is add one little thing. For my business, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? This question is something that formed over years and years of consulting with business owners, with agents, with self-employed people, with basically some of the top producers in our system. Gary refined this question in the beginning through trial and error. The story he shared with me and he shares in the book is it began with, the end of a consulting call with the business person. You agree, what are you going to accomplish between now and the next call, usually the next week? And they would identify the 3 or 4 things that were most important, and then Gary would hold them accountable to it. What he started noticing was that if they had 4 things on their list, they might do half of them, but they wouldn't always do the most important ones. And so he started experimenting with the way he closed the calls. Well, for instance, he'd be talking to Ian. Ian, well, between now and next week, what are the 3 things that you can do, right, such that by doing them, everything will be easier and necessary? And what he discovered is that people might do 1 or 2, but they wouldn't do the number 1 thing. And it was finally out of frustration that he actually uttered, so if there's just one thing that you can do between now and next week, what would that be? One thing. And what he discovered is when you ask for one thing, people naturally tend to go to the greatest priority, and 2, they tend to do it. If you only have one thing on your list and someone's holding you accountable to doing it the next week, you have no place to hide. It's a yes or no question. Did you do it? Yes or no. And so people started doing their one thing, and then their results started going through the roof. And it was based on that, and then lots of refinement later, that the actual wording that you get in front of you is here. But I would encourage you to do is when you ask this question, listen to your answer. A lot of times you're going to be correct. And also think of things, the actual wording of the question. It's not the 3 things or what can I do. It's what's the one thing I can do. And it's not should do, could do, or would do. It's can do. What can you do right now? We want you getting into action because that action creates feedback. You can see if this is actually leveraged or not. And the other parts of the question, such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary, you're basically telling your brain, I want the biggest lever. I want the thing that has the most results, the most dominoes lined up behind it. Well, I don't know what the specific answer is for you, but I can tell you from a lot of research and a lot of experience listening to Gary coach entrepreneurs all over the United States and Canada and now all over the world, that the one thing that we've found for business is actually quite simple, and it might be right in front of you. It's got to do with people. Hire talent, folks. Talent. We define talent as someone who, one, has the skills to do the job, they have the experience to do the job, and they're also naturally motivated to do it. There's someone whose behavior lines up with it. Talent is a very specific thing. You look up in your world, and you can probably identify a lot of people that you think of as talent. They just kick butt at whatever it is they do. In your business, starting with the very first hire, you want to hire as big a talent as you possibly can. We've looked at business after business, and frankly, as we say often, no one succeeds alone. Doesn't matter how smart you are, how good you are, whatever it is you do, you won't succeed in any extraordinary way alone. It's a myth, this idea of the lone entrepreneurial genius. They always had someone else beside them. And Gary even usually devotes the whole session at our annual conference to talking about the pairings of great entrepreneurs. You know, for every Steve Jobs, there was a Wozniak behind them, right? You can just go all through those pairs. You had Lennon, you had McCarthy. They always ended up working better together. They could do more together than they could do alone. So for your business, we would probably guess, without any other diagnosis, that if you could do one thing on a regular basis, it would be absolutely looking for, identifying, and hiring talent to run your business with you. Now, one of the things I alluded to earlier is this idea of the geometric progression. This shape, right, they call it the hockey stick. And this comes from a little experiment we did with an Excel spreadsheet and this idea that a 2-inch domino can knock over one that's 50% larger. If you ran those numbers out as far as you could, and presuming you could actually build dominoes that big, by the 18th domino, a 2-inch domino in this progression would be able to knock over a domino larger than the Leaning Tower. By the 23rd, it would be way higher than the Eiffel Tower. 31 dominoes into the run, it would be 3,000 feet above Everest. And just 57 into it, it would almost bridge the distance between the Earth and the Moon. It's what they call, that's the shape of a geometric progression. In our experience, this is also the shape of big success in business, right? You have a run, you lay down a foundation, and over time, it grows. We actually had one of our interns at our private equity company take a book called The 100 Greatest Businesses that Fortune magazine put out, and he profiled each of them, looked at how long it took them to form their base and actually launch to some measure of, either acceptable success, meaning they started profiting, or they launched what they're known for, their big product. And on average, it was 8.5 years. Yet a lot of them were hailed as overnight successes. The foundation that I will tell you that a lot of them started very early on is they had great partners. They had great vendors. They had great people working in the business. Almost always those first few dominoes are just a few amazing people. And Gary, one of the things he says, and I love it, the best way to start a great big business is to start a great small business. And the best way to start a great small business is one amazingly productive individual at a time. In most cases, it's the entrepreneur himself or herself. They begin because they're so motivated, they have this amazing vision that they are absolutely going to make this happen. That kind of productivity is hard to match. But when you do, when you bring another person in that has that same level of motivation, that's willing to put their all on the line every single day, that's what starts this geometric progression that makes some of the biggest businesses happen over time. One way to look at it, and this goes way back to some very, very old classes that we've been teaching in our company for, gosh, two and a half decades, is this idea of every business moves from I do it to we do it to they do it. And this is going to surprise some people that the business doesn't show up until they do it. It all starts with you, right? I do it. You start your business, whatever it is. You're baking muffins, you're making scones, you're selling real estate. Maybe you've got an amazing idea and you're going to change the world by curing some amazing disease. It begins with you and your passion and your ability to move the needle. As you start to succeed, you earn the right to pay other people to help you. That's when we do it kicks in. So at the first level, I do it is about mastery of productivity at a personal level. We do it becomes about mastering hiring and delegation, right? It's a whole different communication ball game when you have to include a team. Well, what am I going to do versus what are you going to do? Because we're doing this together. And the last stage is somehow the most difficult for most people to bridge. They do it is about stepping out of the business. And to do that, you have to have standards for service, and systems for delivering it. so that when you're not in the business, it still reflects the standards that you wanted to hold to it. I overheard Gary teaching a business seminar about 2 weeks ago, and he said something that I thought was really great. Someone asked if you need to be kind of a, a control freak, someone who's always micromanaging people. And he said, yes, but like in a healthy way, right? You definitely want to be a stickler for your standards, but it's not about you looking over everyone's shoulder. You need to have a system for doing it, right? You need to have a trigger, a system that a red flag goes up and whoa, hey, our systems aren't working anymore. I've had the privilege to work with the Alamo Drafthouse. It's a local theater that started here in Austin, is now franchising across the nation. And they have a trigger. They use Net Promoter. And they understand very clearly that anybody who leaves their business and is a negative promoter for their business, it costs them $7,500. But they watch that score, and they know when it gets to a certain place, positive or negative, that they either have to step in and investigate their standards, or they need to pat someone on the back because they're doing so well. Do you have a canary in the coal mine in your business? Are you thinking that way so that you can step out and have it run to your standards when you're gone? That's about they do it. And the last barrier for people, quite frankly, is ego. People say it can't be done as well as I can do it. And the longer you buy into that, the longer it'll be true. Because the chances are, if you're an entrepreneur and you're doing many things, and remember, we're talking about a book called The One Thing, having specialists who are passionate about doing their one thing, take different parts of that off your plate, will virtually every time deliver better service to your customers and better products for your customers. Because those people have focus, whereas you do not. So think about it as I do it, we do it, they do it. Another kind of popular paradigm for this was in the cash flow quadrant. And this is really the definition of a business starts showing up. And you know what? I'm looking at this and I've got a typo. It actually, we have to flip the B and the S. There we go, for me not actually checking my work. But the E stands for an employee. You start off as an employee. You move from an employee to self-employed. So mentally make that switch for me, folks. I'll make that change before we actually share this. We share this template. So you go from employee to self-employed. Self-employed, that's I do it, to we do it. Self-employed means either you're an individual contractor or you are working with a group of people in your business. And a lot of people refer to that as a business. What they don't realize is that if they are removed from the business and it won't go on, it's not a business. A business is back to that concept of they do it. So remember, I do it, you might be an employee, you might be self-employed. We do it is still very much, at most, self-employed. Self-employed means if you step out of the business, it ceases to function in the same level. They do it is the true measure of a business. It's when you can step out and everything functions the way you want it. The last step, by the way, is when you go from I work for my money, we work for my money, they work for my money, and then the I stands for investor. And that's really your money works to make more money. So I'm going to get now to what can I do about this. If you get this and you think, wow, all right, I need to have people in my business. I need talent, because talent is where great businesses all start. Well, if you remember from the book, we encourage you, whatever your one thing is, to make it a habit. Make it a habit, and that takes on average 66 repetitions, on average, so that about 66 cycles into it, it becomes something that you don't have to work for. It rather works for you. I'll tell you what I've done. I'm part of about 6 different businesses, and when I asked what's the one thing I could do for all of them, I came up with talent as well. It's not surprising based on how much Gary talks about it. But I look up and I thought, wow, what can I do? So I instituted, here I'm a writer, I'm an introvert, I set a goal of just adding 50 talented people to my database every year. So every Wednesday I have a little session, and it's a little window in my calendar that I keep free, so that if I meet someone and they strike me as talent, whether I'm looking for that kind of person or not, I'll say, hey, why don't we get together? Why don't we have a phone call? Why don't we have coffee? And I get a chance to get to know that person without having that desperation of needing them in my business, right? You know, as people used to talk about, when you go out looking for someone to fill a position that you desperately need filled, it's a little bit like that desperate person that asked you out in high school. It's not as attractive, right? Now you're going out into the world, you don't have any agenda, you're just looking for talented people. It's actually worked out really well. I'm in my 2nd year of implementing it. And because I had no agenda and I was just adding people into my database, I met with people that I didn't have any strong connections to. Well, what happened is later, when it turned out that I did need to fill a position, those people were already on call. They're already in relationship. You know, one of the examples is last summer for our real estate team, we needed a showing assistant. I ran into a young man at Nordstrom's. We started talking. He asked me what I did. I said I worked in real estate. He said, wow, can you recommend some good books? I'm thinking of getting my license. I, of course, recommended the books that Gary and I had written. He'd already read them. I'm like, wow. All right, here's a sharp-looking, sharp-talking, someone who's clearly interested in my industry. I got his card, and I said, you know what? We should have coffee sometime. It turned out like 3 months later, we had an opening on our team, and guess who we hired? Well, we'd already found them. We didn't have to go looking in desperation. I knew what his behavior was because I'd given him a behavioral assessment. I'd taken him through several steps of the process just like I would hiring someone, sitting down for an interview, a screening interview, getting their behavior, which is part of our process. And now I had them right there on my bench when we needed them. And that's come up again and again. Or those people have actually referred me to the person that I didn't know. But they're in your network. My challenge to you would be, if I'm an introvert and I'm shooting for 50, what's the one thing that you could do so that you're regularly looking for talent for your business? Should it be something that you do every day? Do you need to call the people in your network and just say, hey, you know, our business is always growing and I'm trying to stay ahead of it. Who do you know that's really talented that I should be talking to? Most people are flattered to be considered talent, or people who know people who are talent. It's not a question that will get people to hang up on you. You'd be really surprised. So can you call your sphere? Could you email them as part of your regular newsletter? We're always looking for talent. Here's where you apply. What kind of net can you cast? You know, some of my friends that I look up to run businesses, they do what I'm doing today. They teach. They understand that if they have talent needs, that they can get in front of a lot of people at once by having something to teach. And they go travel around the country and they teach seminars on business. And maybe they let it drop that, hey, I'm looking for this or that. And then people come right up out of the audience and say, hey, I know someone. Teaching is a great way to get in front of a lot of folks. So I don't know your answer. I do know that if you're a business person or you aspire to be a business person instead of a self-employed person, that you're going to need talent in your life. One of the things that I was researching recently was why bad hires are made. And the statistic that jumped out to me is that 40% of bad hires were made because the business had an urgent need to fill the position. If your business is growing, if you're constantly faced with urgent needs to fill positions, getting ahead of this and having a bench of potential talent is absolutely the way to go. I'll tell you, if they're part of your brain's going, but why would I go to all that trouble when I don't even need them yet? One, you're building a network. These people will be flattered that you did it. Two, even if you never need them, you become the person that other people call and saying, hey, I know that you meet with a lot of people. Do you know someone who fits this description? And then you can help connect people to other opportunities. One of my wife, Wendy's, you know, great mentors in her business world, that's probably the number one thing she did, is that she would meet people and go, you know, I know someone that you should know. And that sort of referring talent made her an immensely popular business person and brought tons of opportunities to her business. So whatever your answer is, I'd encourage you to take a look at, what would I need to do to implement this today? How could I get started on this in the next 24 hours? I was sharing with Ian before this call that it's kind of funny. You know, there's exactly 66 days left in 2014. So if you wanted to start building the talent habit today, you could absolutely start today. You could pick up the phone and start calling around and making appointments with talent before you need them. So I hope this has been instructive. I don't see any questions yet. I'm about to turn it over to Q&A and bring Ian back on the phone. So really quickly, folks, if you have one, excellent. I see some questions coming in. Drop some questions in, and then we'll start answering them. I'm going to turn it over to Ian real quick, and then we can make this a little bit more interactive. Ian, what else would you add to that?
Thanks, Jay. That was great. Before we go into the Q&A section, a quick reminder here. Our URL is on the slide right now, www.theonething.com. We have great free resources and tools for you to download and that apply to every aspect of your life. So we encourage you to please go and check that out. And again, if you have questions, please ask them right now. Use the panel, the question panel on the GoToWebinar interface, and Jay will be answering questions live right now. We have one question already, and we're going to see.
Read that?
Yeah. All right.
All right. So the question I got here is: good talent can be expensive. How do you suggest finding the best talent when you're starting your business and can't afford the best talent? That's a great question. Thank you so much for asking it. We categorize 3 kinds of talent. It's kind of evolved over the years, but we think of, you have talent, you have emerging talent, and proven talent. Talent is just someone who is naturally going to do the job well. You know, if it's a very high social position, they're naturally social. They love to talk to people. If it requires a lot of speed, they're the kind of person who moves fast. If it's in accounting, you know, they've got the skills. They've got the basic knowledge already there. Maybe they've got a CPA license already on hand. But they don't really have a track record of success or much. But when you see them, everyone goes, wow, you know, that Diane person, she's amazing. You need to talk to her. Well, when someone has all the right ingredients, but they don't have a long track record, you know, they tend to be younger, they tend to be less expensive. Emerging talent might be someone who's just been doing the job for a year. A lot of people don't know this, but when Mary Tennant joined Keller Williams, you know, she was a real estate agent. Gary was able to, or Mark, I think in that time, Mark Willis was able to recruit her into management after she was Rookie of the Year. And the general thinking, I think, was if you waited much longer, she would have been too expensive for them to afford. So emerging talent is someone who, right out of the gate, has distinguished themselves, but they don't have a long enough track record yet to really command the highest salaries. And the last category is what most people think of when they think of talent. You know, for basketball, it's LeBron James. Well, it's hard to afford those people. So we almost always coach people in new businesses to be looking for just talent, people who really don't have a long track record but are really predisposed to be very good at that, and then people who might be emerging talent. Maybe they have a short track record. They're always going to be less expensive.
So the next question, Nancy, and this follows up on what you just answered, Jay, but maybe we can add up a little bit to it. It says, Nancy says, I have consistently made quote-unquote bad hires. How do I hire the right people?
Nancy, we've all been there. We believe that you should follow a process. In Keller Williams, we've invested, I mean, quite literally millions in licensing and developing our own training around hiring. We have a course called Recruit Select. We have one that we're building out for our business partners called Career Visioning. But here's the basics. When you're going out to make a great hire, you need to have a very clear job description first and foremost. And by job description, I don't mean an HR something where if you can't lift more than 20 pounds, you can't do the job. What are the goals for the position? How will you know they're being successful? And then what are the 4 or 5 activities, no more than that, really hopefully just 3 maybe, activities that if this person did them well, they would almost certainly be successful, right? You ask those 2 questions, you get very clear about the priority, and then you start looking for, well, what kind of person does those things well? We call that a missing persons report, right? And you draw that as a little narrative description. Then we reach out to our network and ask, hey, have you seen someone who does one blah, 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 right? You're casting your net for someone who does things very specific. A lot of job descriptions aren't about the key activities that actually make someone successful. So that's the first step. Get very, very clear about what someone has to do to be successful. And then we believe you should be very thorough in terms of interviewing them. Does their behavior line up? Whether you use a Myers-Briggs or anything else, we believe those things matter. So start with a great job description, and that'll get you probably, that might be the one thing that starts everything else. A very clear idea of who they are and what they will have to do is a great filter.
That's a great answer. We have a lot of questions coming up now. We appreciate that. We're going to try to get through as many as we can. The next one here, Josh says, when you don't have a need to hire, how do you word the invitation to meet and ask them to do a behavioral profile? What script do you use?
Depends on which business I'm talking about, Josh, but let's just say it was for our real estate business. I would just have a line that demonstrates that we've grown, right? For the last 5 years, our real estate team has grown by 40% year over year. I actually might be selling Wendy short by I say that. I don't have that script on top of my mind. But have a script that says we are growing. And then say that. Say we're always growing and we're always looking for talent before we need it. Who do you know that looks like this? And most people will respond pretty favorably. So pick your business, have a slight little script, right? Some talking points about how it's growing. Hey, I work at Keller Williams Realty International. You know, last year we were voted one of the top 10 places to work in America. And man, we are always looking for great people to join our team. Do you know anybody who works in accounting that maybe we should be talking to, right? It's as simple as that. Don't overcomplicate it, but you want 2 things. You want to have a little invitation about who you're looking for, and you need to have something that says, we're growing, like some evidence that says we're growing, because that person might repeat it to the next person. In my experience, talented people are happily employed. So you're going to be talking to them, and they're going to be already employed somewhere else and having to kind of recruit them to your business.
Here's another one. Brad asks, the idea of focusing can seem to an exec team like slowing down. How might I get greater buy-in? I already bought them your book.
All right, Brad. Been there. I understand a lot of entrepreneurs, they are successful because they see all the things that need to be done. What sometimes slows them down is they think that they have to do all of them at once. I get it. I think that in this context of hiring, I'm trying to think of the right way to get better buy-in. I think if you look up the words cost of a bad hire on the internet, you can find dozens and dozens of examples. Tony Hsieh, the guy who founded Zappos, he claims to have lost, I want to say, 100 million, or is it 10 million? I think it's 100 million because of bad hires. He feels so strongly about having a process that when someone goes through Zappos University, and you probably heard this, Brad, they offer them $2,000 at the end of their initial training to quit. They're so clear that having someone great is better than having someone who's just good or may not be a bad fit. They'll pay you $2,000 to just walk away. No shame. They're not ringing a bell at the SEAL camp, right? They're just going to go up and say, hey, I'll pay you $2,000 to go out and look for another job if you're not absolutely sure this is the right place. So there's a lot of evidence out there from really successful people that building around a platform of great talent, people who are engaged in your business, is absolutely the way to go. A lot of executives like evidence. I might start there, Brad. I might start there with, here's why we need to make this our one thing.
So another one here. Tiffany says, how do you keep top talent?
Well, you got to deliver on your promises, Tiffany. First and foremost, if you said you're growing, you need to be growing. Talent needs to have opportunity to grow into. And when they don't see it, they start looking. I actually just got referred an individual who is the VP, and he is in charge of finances for a large, and it's kind of a hot company a few years ago. They're not really in the news anymore. He met with the CEO and said, you know, I don't think there's enough room for me to grow in my career. He's in such good standing, he could have this conversation, and the CEO said, you know what, we're not going to begrudge you. If you need to look, you need to look. We just want a chance to match. And so this person is now a free agent, so to speak, on the market, even though their own company identified them as talent. The thing that talent will do to an entrepreneur is to push them to think bigger than they were willing to think for themselves. If you're only thinking big enough for your dream true, you won't be able to attract and keep talent. You need your business to be willing to grow big enough to encompass their dreams. And one of the little footnotes that Gary often puts in there, you don't have to make it grow. You just have to be willing for it to grow. Real talent will say, great, then get out of my way. I'm going to go make that happen. You can put the carrot out there, but they have to win it, right? If you want to make another X dollars or whatever, well, then you need to launch this new division, which will be new revenue income producing for the business, and we'll give you a part of that. They have to go build it, but getting out of the way for real talent is all they need. They just need to be licensed and that you're willing to stand behind them to go do that. I hope that helps, Tiffany.
So we have a question here from Claire, and this is a building a habit question. So she says, if we're trying to change a habit and we falter on one of the days, can we pick up where we left off, or do you think we have to start the 66 days over again?
If it's a daily habit, I recently was trying to take a typing challenge to improve my typing skills. As a writer, I felt like I could be more prolific and get more done if I didn't have to hunt and peck so much. And I got 24 days into it. I missed 3 days straight, and I tore down my 66-day challenge and started over because I had lost the momentum. I think it's your call. I know people who have missed a day, they were sick, you know, just life happened, and there were bigger priorities than doing that, and they allowed themselves to pick it up. The point isn't that 66 days is the magic number. What it suggests is, on average, that after 66 repetitions, you're going to be habituated to doing it. I coach people to pay attention. If that happens earlier and you really truly believe it, then go to the next habit, right? You don't have to force yourself to go all 66. On average, you should. But if you get to the end of 66, you can celebrate. Great, you did it. But do you need to keep going? You know, if you were trying to work out in the mornings, I usually tell people, you know, when you start waking up before the alarm clock goes off in the morning, you're habituated to that activity, right? Your body is already ready to wake up before you're even conscious. That's a great sign. I had a friend that used the 66 days to quit smoking. She got to the end, I congratulated her, and I just asked the simple question, do you really think you kicked the habit? This is losing a habit, not getting one? She goes, I'm not sure. I still think about it. And I said, why don't you start another 66 days? She actually went almost the entire 66-day challenge another time, and then she came up to me about 120-something days into the whole thing and said, it's happened. I felt it. It felt very different this week. Gave her a big hug and said, one of the best moves you'll ever make. So the whole idea there, skipping a day, depends on how hard you're going to be. It's about forming the habit. If you skip several days, I would say stop it. If it's just one day and you think that you still have your momentum, keep at it.
So we have time probably for a couple more questions. And this one, Lisa asks, what other examples can you give besides talent when, you know, finding your one thing for your business?
Well, the one thing can also be what's our focus. You know, one of the examples I like to use, because I'm in Texas and I get to use them a lot as a service, you know, Southwest Airlines became one of the dominant, if not a dominant, but the dominant airlines because they really understood who they were. They were the low-cost airlines, and everyone in their organization knew what their one thing was. We deliver value at lower cost. Because of that, it dictated their hub strategy. It dictated what kind of planes they would use, right, so they could save on maintenance and therefore pass those savings along. It's why we can get peanuts and snacks and drinks, but you don't get served meals. It's why you had a cattle call. All of those things came from one idea. And since everyone knew that, they were able to all contribute to making them more of their one thing. So beyond people to drive it, right, you need the actual idea. What is your business's one thing? You know, is Microsoft, is it really Windows? I don't know. Maybe it's Office, right? They get about 50% of the revenue from each. I would look at the future and go, well, which business are we going to be in 10 years? Understand what your one thing is and give that thing disproportionate resources. That would be the first place my mind goes.
All right. Then Patrick asks, how many habits should you be working on at once?
That's a trick question. One, Patrick, one, right? We don't divide our focus. When we talk about the domino effect, and the first lesson when I teach this book, you know, in corporate seminars and workshops is, the first lesson of dominoes is that, yes, many, many things get accomplished, but success is sequential, not simultaneous. You do one thing at a time. And once that habit's working for you, you can add another one. I look at people like Gary, and it's intimidating. Here he is. He's in the middle of his life, and he can, you know, bench press like 225 pounds. He's got practically no body fat. He's an amazing business person. He knows how to hire. He knows how to delegate. He's a great writer. He's actually an accomplished musician. Like, you keep adding it up, and you're like, how do you learn how to do all that? He's actually a good fly fisherman now. But when I met him, right at the beginning, he just bought his guitar and was trying to get back into it. He'd never used a fly rod before we started talking about it in the writing room. And then he decided he would take that up with his son, John. What he became early in his career is someone who understood how to line up and accumulate powerful habits in his life. He understands practice. He understands practice over time. And he got very in tune with that. So one at a time, you can accumulate so many over the course of your life, but be patient. If you let your foot off the gas before it's truly set, you'll be wasting your effort.
So another one here from Dale, and this one says, I have so many passions in creative arts, so not necessarily business, but unless maybe he's thinking about having a business that involves creative arts. So he says, how can I identify the one I should focus on?
All right, Dale. You know, I think about a lot of artists. You know, I kind of fall into that category as a writer. You know, I look up and Gary and I published 12 books, and you know, Gary asked the question. He goes, well, if we're writing books about investing and real estate careers and business productivity, and we've got one coming up about hiring, and you know, how do we say that we're about one thing? And I said the one thing is that if you look at all of our past books and the ones that we're planning to write, we always ask the same question, right? For our readers, what's the priority? What's the one thing they need to know? All of our books kind of come from the same line of approach to how you do it. That is what's going to define us. I know some artists, right, and what defines them is their style. Like you could probably notice a Picasso from across the room. You know, there are different musicians that you hear and you go, wow, I know who's playing that guitar. People get a style that allows them to do many different songs, many different paintings, maybe sometimes in areas that surprise people, but they allow their artistic style to translate from one thing to the other. And it takes time and practice to discover what that one thing you do that's special is over time. So I would encourage you to say, well, what's the one thing that all of these things that I'm interested in have in common, right? Is there a stylistic choice? You know, do I tend to always include a black cat in every painting? You know, is there something that I could do to tie them together so that when people think of me, they think of, well, that's the guy who does the black cats in the paintings guy, right? It allows them to let you own, I mean, this is positioning, back to the old Trout and Reese, right? You can occupy a position within a big, broad category of someone who does that. I'm a big fan. This will be the last example. Like, I know Ian's here, and I know we have other questions, but Jessica Hagge is an artist, right? All she does is little drawings that would go on an index card that say something about modern life. Well, she's translated her one thing, right, which is doodles, into several books that were bestsellers, and now she's a columnist for Fortune magazine. There's someone who took her one thing and started going, wow, I can be a columnist now. Now I can be a speaker. It can lead, one thing that done really well and remarkably can open up many, many doors for you. I hope that helps, Dale.
And then maybe we have time for one more right here.
Yeah.
It's going back to talent, and Vicky asks, how long should I give a person of talent after hire to be on their own?
How long should I give a person of talent after hire to be on their own? How long do they, before they get to earn the right to be self-managed, I'm guessing? In our process, we put a lot of emphasis on the first 90 to 100 days. And if you know the 3 or 4 activities that will make them successful, for the first 90 days, you're going to meet with them daily, weekly, high frequency, even if they showed up as someone with a lot of pedigree. And you're going to, as Gary would say, inspect what you expect. Are they doing it the way you would like to do it? Do they need more training? Do they need to understand your standards? You're meeting daily to make sure that, one, they have everything they need to be successful, and you're trying to get them to go do that job as fast as you can. So if it's someone who's coding, you're giving them little assignments, right? I need you to program this button on our widget. I need you to do this thing on our website. And as fast as you can, determine, are they as good as you thought they were at doing the actual things they need to do to be successful? That first 90 days is where they earn their freedom. You know, I had one assistant that I'm going to say rode, you know. I was really on her, and I kept joking at the end of every week, said, great, another great week, hug all your friends, because next week we may decide not to be in business, because I treated that first 100 days not as a honeymoon, like congrats, we're in business together, but as really an audition, right? This is your chance to audition to keep the job. And it was very clear from the beginning. And at the end of the 100 days, she absolutely passed with flying colors. She actually she had a T-shirt made that had 100 on it. She was so proud she made it. But after that, I got to pull back and relax a little bit for myself, because I don't like to manage, and give her some more space. You know, just as a point of fact, when I started writing with Gary, in the first 100 days, we wrote The Millionaire Real Estate Agent. If he wanted to find out if I could help him write books, he found out, and that book's gone on to sell over 850,000 copies. And he was in my kitchen every day, Ian. I've never had someone push me so hard for such a sustained amount of time. But at the end of that, we absolutely knew that we could make this partnership work. And, hey, we've been doing it for several years.
Great answers, Jay. Thank you. We've actually reached now the end of our webinar. We want to thank our audience. We hope that you found it valuable. Jay, would you want to say some final words?
No, I just say, ask the question, what's the one thing I can do for my business such that by doing it, everything else will be easier and necessary? And like that one person asked, if it's not people, it might be something else. Listen to your answer and go make that your priority. That would be it, Ian.
Thanks so much. A few next steps, folks. Please, we ask you to take a short survey upon exiting the webinar. We really appreciate your feedback. This helps us improve our webinars. Also, look for an email within 24 hours. This email will contain a link to download your personal workbook so you can discover your one thing. This is a very good and well-developed document that we suggest you get. And also, you'll get a link to the recording of this webinar. Please feel free to share with your friends and family. Share the messaging of the one thing if you feel that this is something that would resonate with them. We have our next webinar scheduled. It'll be on December 12th, so you can mark your calendar down. The topic will be the one thing for your health, and more information will be forthcoming on the next following days. Again, follow us on Twitter at The One Thing Book and at jpapazan. We're always tweeting about exciting themes and topics related to the one thing, and also our new events are always advertised there. Continue the conversation with Jay.
And I was just going to add that if you did not get your question answered, you can reach out to us on Twitter or on our Facebook channels, and we will do our very best to get all your questions answered.
There you go. Jay will be kind enough to get back to you. If you were some of the few that we didn't get back to you during the webinar, he'll answer your questions if you tweet at him. And again, continue the conversation if you're a Twitter user with the hashtag #TheOneThing. Finally, visit our website, www.theonething.com. We have great free resources, as I mentioned earlier, for you to download, and they apply to actually all the aspects of your life, not only for your business, but for all those other circles that you sow. And again, we want to thank you, and we look forward to seeing you in December. Bye.